Thanks for joining me on episode 415 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Mark Aho, author of Building Wealth and Living in Faith. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the right relationship between faith and money is key to doing that, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
Is limited. Our present self can only do so much. Our present self can only achieve so much. But man, our future self will take care of the problem. If I make a mistake today, future self is Superman. Future self will solve it. Future self will get me out of debt and get money coming in and make me rich or whatever it is. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about why focusing on your future self is a key to making an impact, why your present self often sabotages your future self, and about how to be attentive to your future self. As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon. One of the things that came up a few different times as Taylor and I were talking over the last 4 weeks is this idea of your future self, your present self, your past self, and your future self. In a very real way, these selves are different from each other. You know, all too often we think of ourselves as the same today as we were 10 years ago. And the truth is, even if you think you haven't changed, you have. We all do. We change and grow all the time. But what happens to us a lot of times is we become so focused on the present that we don't think about the impact that our present has on our future. I know that sounds silly because obviously the choices you make today are going to affect what you do, who you become, what you believe, how you grow, how you succeed, how you fail. All of these things are affected by the choices you make today. And that's obvious at one level. And yet, at the same time, we often just stop paying attention to that. We stop thinking about it because we get so busy in the life. I mean, let's face it. Our lives are busy. We're doing things all the time. We're going to work. We're raising kids. We're living with a spouse. We're going out and doing things to earn money, to date, to make relationships. We go to church. We go to recreation. We go to the movies. We do whatever it is. We do all of these things all the time. And to actually have enough time to take a step back and assess, what are you doing today? And how is what you're doing today affecting what's going to come in the future? Is an important step to take, but it's one that most of us don't carve out the time to. But thinking about your future self is one of the keys to making an impact on the world, because the truth is, if you want to make an impact when it comes to finances, you've got to think about the future. You can't just be focused on the present. It can't just be about how much am I going to earn today. It can't just be about how much am I going to spend today. It's also got to be somewhat about how is that going to affect my ability to do things in the future? How is it going to affect my ability to live out my calling day after day? How is it going to allow me to make change and make my calling sustainable, not just something that happens for a short time? Because that sustainability, that consistency, that persistence is one of the keys to impact, as we talked about yesterday. But to be persistent means that you've got to have that ability to continue, to keep going past the challenges, to keep going beyond just the moment, and keep it and sustain it and do it and make an impact and talk to others long enough and consistently enough to make change. But all too often what happens is our present self gets focused on the moment, the pleasure of the moment. You know, we get attracted by that salty snack or that sugary snack, and it tastes good. And that present moment has future consequences on our health, on our weight, on our ability to live well, to exercise, to do all these other things. The things you do today affect the choices you make in the future. All too often, that moment of, I want it and I want it now, so I'm going to purchase it on debt, is really leveraging your future income for your present pleasure. Your present self will often sabotage your future self. Because you see, in a very real way, most of us have this weird belief, this strange limiting belief that our present self is limited. Our present self can only do so much. Our present self can only achieve so much. But man, our future self will take care of the problem. If I make a mistake today, future self is Superman. Future self will solve it. Future self will get me out of debt and get money coming in and make me rich, or whatever it is, whatever the mindset is, whatever the thing is that you want to accomplish, future self can do it. I have confidence in future self. I don't have so much confidence in present self. And so I'm going to indulge in the moment. I'm going to buy that on credit. I'm going to finance the new car. After all, you only live once. So why not live now in the moment? But the truth is, you don't only live once. You live each and every day of your life. And those moments that future self is going to have, those moments complicate that future based on what present self does. The choices that you make today affect what you do in the future. If you don't believe that, just stop and think for a minute. Stop and think about choices that you've made in the past and how they've affected you today, both good choices and bad. This isn't even just about mistakes. It can even be about good choices. The good choices that present self makes affect your future self too. The fact that present self looks at something and goes, I'm not going to buy it now because I don't have the money for it. Not I can't afford the payments, but I don't even have the money for it, so I'm not going to buy it. The fact that you walk past that cake and turn down that second slice of cake affects how you feel and what you do in the future as well. You have to be attentive to future self. And the way to do that is to actually focus and develop and spend some time on doing that. Meaning you actually have to put some time into your daily schedule that is about thinking about what's going on in the future. That is about what are the consequences of the choices that I'm making today, and what are they going to have on what I do in the future. You have to think today. And the ability to think today about the future comes from actually doing it. So how much time do you have in your weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual calendars? Where do you put it on your calendar? The time to reflect about the past, to figure out what you're going to do in the present so that your future will be better than it's ever been before. And if you don't currently have that kind of appointment on your calendar, then I challenge you to put it on your calendar before this weekend is out. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.